All right, brothers and sisters, welcome to today's Recollections number 5, where we are examining the translations and the lessons and teachings by Bhante Punnaji based on his background and all the translations he's made. Today's topic is Paṭicca-Samuppāda, and Bhante translate this to be concurrent of logical antecedents. I will explain that in a moment. Paṭicca-Samuppada is commonly translated as the 12 links of dependent origination. So it says dependent origination. I will explain later why that translation, that term may not be too accurate, and that's why Bhante came up with his version called Concurrence of Logical Antecedents. So we're going to examine his translations deeply, right? So let's look at today's key topics to cover: the definition of logical antecedents, and then we will talk about a very important aspect of training the mind, training ourselves to advance further, and that is the progressive development of samadhis. And then we will look at the ultimate attainment before Buddhahood. That means this is possible for an anagami. Of course, the Buddhas can do this, and that is bringing the mind to a state where it's cessation of sensations and feelings. I will explain that in more details in a moment. So that is called insentience, avijja. And the word avijja is often translated as ignorance. But Bhante pointed out as far as this condition is concerned, the state of avijja is really insentience. I'll explain that later. All this I will explain in details in a moment. And then we will move on to talk about Paṭicca-Samuppāda proper. And we begin by talking about the emerging from it and what it is really about as a person emerge from insentience experiences Paṭicca-Samuppāda. And then we will go into Q&A. Okay. Paṭicca-Samuppāda, why is it called concurrence of concurrence of logical antecedents? Bhante took the Sanskrit word and broke it down because apparently there are more accurate translations of Sanskrit words than Pali words. Somehow, I don't know how that came about, but apparently there are very little disagreement within people who translate Sanskrit words. So Bhante, and that was the reason Bhante took the Sanskrit word. What Paṭicca-Samuppāda is called? Prati Itya Sam Utbada. Prati basically means coming before, that means preceding. All right. Itya means being, that means the actual arriving, the appearing, okay, being. Sam means together, simultaneous. Right? And one thing I want to point out, some of the Sanskrit and Pali words also have a common background with Malay words. So there are some words in Malay which is the same. Sam is also in Malay, sama means together, simultaneous. Okay. So there are that's why some of the words I can understand better, like rupa, nama, rupa. These have Malay background at the same meaning. So sam means simultaneous or together. Okay. Utpada means arising. So Bhante basically says, putting it together, the whole term simply means concurrence of logical antecedents. I'll touch on antecedents in a moment, logical antecedents, but concurrence. Concurrence is something that happens sort of simultaneously or together. It's not one after another. Okay, so I'll come to that in a moment. There are three types of antecedents. The first type is called temporal antecedent. Temporal antecedent is basically dependent on time. It's like striking the bell continuously or clapping the hand like that. So you hear each clap one after another in time. So there is a time element involved separating each clap or each striking of the bell. That's called temporal antecedents. The second type of antecedent is called spatial antecedents. Spatial antecedents simply refers to physical spacing, arranging objects on the table, and every object appears next to each other in space. Objects do not overlap physically when you put them together. Even say together, the best is either on top or next to each other. So they don't overlap. So that's why it's called spatial. And then the third type of antecedents is logical, which has to do with conditions, necessary conditions. So seeing an object with your eye or hearing a sound with your ear depend on presence of necessary conditions for the experience to arise. That means this is very important. Depend on presence of necessary condition. For example, seeing. Seeing is only possible if there is light. If it's completely pitch dark, you can't see. So one of the conditions of seeing is there has to be light. The second one is the light must be reflected from the object entering your sense organ. If there is any obstruction, blockages, preventing the light from entering your eye, again, that is a condition necessary. So even if there's a dog in front of you, if you put a big curtain right in front blocking the view of the dog, you can't see the dog. So that is one of the conditions, that there must be no obstruction and all that. So depend on the presence of necessary condition. That's why it's called logical. Temporal is to do with time. Spatial is to do with space. And we all know when we speak of time and space, we speak of existence. Whereas logical is dependent on conditions. So time and space is existential. Because we live in this world where we experience things around us, we are locked in to existential thinking. Everything we experience has to do with time and space. That's why our mind is locked into existential thinking, whereas logical is an experiential thing. Experiential. It is an experience of conditions arising, experience of seeing, experience of hearing. Similarly, hearing requires air with molecules. In outer space, you can't hear sounds because there is very, very little molecules, so air vibrations cannot travel. Right? So that's why in outer space, there is no sound, so to speak. You know, so therefore, realize Bhante has always reminded us to remain experiential. Think of things happening in terms of necessary conditions arising. And Paṭicca-Samuppāda is about this, the concurrence happening of conditions arising. Go back to this. Okay, the concurrence happening, concurrence of the conditions necessary for something to happen. Therefore, the word common translation of Paṭicca-Samuppāda as dependent origination is not so accurate. I would call it wrong. I'm not going to say it's wrong, but it's not so precise. It says A happens dependent on B. But the point is, if you were to light a candle, now my question to you is, when a candle is lighted, what does it depend on? Some people will say, oh, it depends on striking the match and placing the match onto the wick of the candle, and then the light, and the candle is lighted. Okay, but then again, there could be other conditions. That is not the only condition. What are other conditions? Instead of striking a match and placing the flame onto the wick, it can also be you use a cigarette lighter, clicking it, and then placing the flame onto the wick. That's a different way of lighting a candle. So various conditions can come together. Different conditions can still make something happen. That's why we cannot fix it as something that is specifically one thing, has to be one thing. So it's really conditional. We're going to examine how this concurrence of these conditions arising is explained in Paṭicca-Samuppāda by Bhante. I hope all of you have seen the video that I have requested people to watch before we start, because I'm not going to spend too much time going into repeating some of those very detailed things which Bhante has been talking about. So getting on with it, I hope you understand now why Bhante translates Paṭicca-Samuppāda as concurrence of logical antecedents. Now, as with in the past, we come to a point before we move further. I need to make sure that you are clear of what I have touched on. So I would like people to now let me know if you have any doubts about the meaning of antecedents, the meaning of logical, and the meaning of concurrence. Is there any issue about that? Anyone? If none, I will move on. Okay, if nobody has any questions about concurrence, about logical, about antecedents, let's move on. So we all know from our past recollections and from all the detailed teachings by Bhante about the mind, we have three parts of mental experiences. Again, remember, it's experiences, right? So three parts. The Vijnana has to do with the process of perceptions arising because when we become aware of perceived objects. Mano is when we begin to interpret whatever we have perceived, give meaning, cognizing the experience, creating concepts and choices. And finally, chitta is commonly called the emotional mind, the mood and temperament, where we begin to react to feelings, whether something is pleasant or unpleasant. And this is called mood and temperament. Okay, so mood has to do with how you feel about something. You are in a good mood because you feel good. You are in a bad mood or foul mood because you are feeling bad about what is going on in your life. Right? So, and temperament has to do with your tendency to react. If you want to react badly, then you are having a bad temper. That's why they call, oh, you have a bad temper because you react badly. And, then temperament refers to this tendency to react. Okay, so therefore it is how you feel about something, which has to do with Vedana, and your reaction, which has to do with Tanha. And these are the two things that ultimately lead to all the suffering in the world. The fact that we begin to feel about something and we react to it, it leads to all kinds of suffering after that. In fact, suffering gets worse when we begin to personalize the experience, upadana. And then by personalizing, it leads to the notion, oh, I exist, the self exists. I'm going to explain this in much more detail in a moment, as you see when we talk about Paṭicca-Samuppāda. So when we talk about these three parts of mental experiences, as we go through Paṭicca-Samuppāda, I think you will become very crystal clear why I put in words like this, which is based on what Bhante has explained to me. You see, some of these words are not found directly in Bhante's books exactly as they are. These are based on my discussions with Bhante, so I put the words together and basically, hopefully, can project a meaning clearer. One of my, without trying to brag, one of my skill is when I understand something, I'm very good at presenting it in words and in statements to clarify it. So that's why I put these words like that. And later on, when I did this, I didn't think about Paṭicca-Samuppāda, but when I completed it and thought about Paṭicca-Samuppāda, I was very amazed that it aligns perfectly. And I'll show you in a moment. Okay, let's move on. So Bhante has always been saying this chitta, the affective process, is always shaking and agitating, agitation to the mind, disturbing the mano. This is why chitta is the one that leads to a lot of problem. When you try to think of something, you get upset, you get angry, or you like something because it is pleasant, it feels good. All this is because the mind is unstable, shaking because of chitta. So let's look on what else. So we now examine Paticca-Samuppada in terms of conditions arising, right? So concurrence of these conditions, logical conditions arising, and in terms of logic, not in terms of time or space or existence, but in terms of experience. So bear in mind, everything is experiential. Keep an experiential mindset when we look at what is to come. Okay, the progressive development of samadhis. I'll give you a very quick overview first. In our normal existence, as we speak, we communicate, we relate to one another, we are in what is called the karma bhava. This word karma is not talking about the action and result, not that karma, that is K-A-M-M-A. K-A-M-A actually refers to sensuality, sensual realm. That's why it's called karma bhava, that we have the ability to physically do something, right? And sitting there to meditate is one of the things we can do. Of course, meditation itself is not a physical activity. We sit, but the important thing is to train the mind to calm down. And one of the first things we need to do to calm the mind is to abandon 5 hindrances. We have these 5 hindrances, the most common things that are disturbing the mind. Okay, and we need to calm them, still them, abandon them. Until we become enlightened, we cannot eradicate them. That means we cannot uh, cancel them out or terminate them. No, only the Arahant can terminate all 5 hindrances. So, can you mute your mic, whoever? So only the Arahant can really terminate or eradicate 5 hindrances. Once 5 hindrances are eradicated, they no longer arise. That is an Arahant. Until we become that, even the Anagami hasn't completely eradicated all 5 hindrances. And the 5 hindrances, the Pancha Nivarana. Okay. Once we sit in the meditation, we still the mind and we give up and abandon these 5 hindrances, we can begin to develop 5 janangas or 5 constituents of jhana. Bhante calls jhana as ecstasy, meaning standing out. I think he has explained this many times in various videos. Ecstasy means standing out, thinking there is a world out there. Now you basically back off and look at it, without getting involved with the activity of the world. So sitting there to meditate, you are really standing out from the world. So here it is standing out from whatever that is agitating us and causing problems. And by developing, but first by abandoning the 5 hindrances, we develop these 5 constituents of jhanas, the 5 janangas, vittaka, vichara, piti, sukha, ekagata. We can then enter into jhanas. Until you actually enter into the jhanas, that means you have successfully, completely abandoned 5 hindrances on a temporary basis, and at the same time able to cultivate and develop these 5 constituents. Until that happens, you're still in karma bhava. But once you have reached that point, you begin to enter into jhanas. And then you're entering into a different, I wouldn't say it's a different world. It's basically a different paradigm. Bhante uses the word paradigm shift. Think of it existential. Think of it as experiential. You are now experiencing so-called a different world, right? You're not entering into a different world, so to speak, but you're having a different kind of experience which does not depend on physical. Right? So that is the rupa bhava, which is imagery. Rupa means image, imagery realm. A lot of people have mistranslated the word rupa to object. If we were to, you keep using that word, rupa means object, then rupa bhava is object world. It's the physical world, back to the physical world. No, that's why rupa is never object. It is form, maybe you can use form. Form is basically the outline, the features, all these are form. They are not really the physical object, so to speak. So it's imagery realm. Then you experience the four jhanas. As you cycle through the four jhanas, you begin to reduce the affective process, the chitta, the mind, the part of the mental experience we call chitta, stops. It slows down and stops. Stabilize. By the time you abandon five hindrances and develop the five constituents, chitta is very stable already. No more agitating, right? Because the five hindrances are abandoned, suspended. Now they begin to reduce, right? Reduce means its effect is becoming minimal, and eventually chitta does not have any activity. When chitta stops having an activity, it becomes unified with mano. I'll explain that more in a moment. Then, beyond the four jhana, the higher meditation attainments would be in the arupa bhava, beyond the four jhanas. There are four states. Right? I will go through one by one in a moment. There are four states. And in this process of going through these four states, we call them the ayatanas, gradual reduction of mano occurs. That means now even the mano is disappearing. Eventually, the mano has disappeared, everything ceases. Cessation of sensation and feeling. Sanya Vedayita Nirodha. Cessation of all perceptions. If there is no sanya and vedana, then there is no sankhara, because there is nothing to construct. When there is no sankhara, then there is no vijnana. If there is no vijnana, there is no mano. There's no mano, there is no chitta. All to do with the mind has finally come to a state of complete stillness. I wouldn't say the mind has disappeared, so to speak, because if you think of the mind physically, yeah, you can say it's disappeared. But in terms of mental experience, there is no more experience of mind. So mind has stopped. Okay. All right. How do we do all that? We begin by abandoning and stilling the five hindrances. And these are the five hindrances. I won't go into the practice of meditation because that's very lengthy. So we will talk about it some other time, but we also discussed this already in previous awakening series long time ago. So I won't go through with that. But very quickly, we begin to abandon the five hindrances one by one. We get rid of these five hindrances. Once the five hindrances are completely abandoned, suspended, they are not eradicated. Only the Arahant has eradicated it. So they will come back to us when we wake up from meditation. That means once you come out of meditation, the five hindrances are come back to you. So in meditation, you can completely abandon them, suspend them, right? So they're temporarily not active anymore, right? And listen to Bhante's explanation of how when we abandon the five hindrances, then we can then move into the jhanas and then beyond the jhanas.
What are called the five hindrances? Kama, Chanda, Vyapada, Tina, Midda, Uddacha, Kukkucha. These are emotional states. To get rid of those hindrances means the emotional states which are agitations of the body and mind is stopped. That means calmness is something that is shaking has stopped. You understand? And in that stopping, when the hindrances are gone, what is in the mind is what we call the jnanangas. What are jnanangas? Vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, ekagata.
Okay, so Bhante pointed out that once we have stopped, we begin to develop these five jnanangas. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning again. In sensual realm, that is you and I right now, we are experiencing karma bhava. And if we sit there and meditate and calm the mind and then begin to still the mind, we can do this in a number of ways. And this aspect of meditation is samatha. That's why Bhante says, just relax. One of the important things when Bhante teaches meditation, he does not teach people separately what is samatha, what is vipassana, because there are some people, people like to pursue this so-called higher teachings. So they think, oh, straight away they go into vipassana. No, that doesn't happen. If you cannot practice samatha, you will never ever experience vipassana. And this is part of the samatha experience, abandoning the five hindrances. So once you're able to stop those hindrances from arising, this is stilling the chitta. Now the chitta is still. The chitta is calm. Like Bhante said, no more shaking. Right? No more. It's still. It's still. It's still there. It's still not active. Okay. Then we begin to develop these five jhanangas. And as we go through the jhanas one by one, they begin to reduce. In the first jhana, all five jhanangas are present. And then vitaka, vichara always go together. They are inseparable, just like sanya and vedana are inseparable. So vitaka, vichara are inseparable. They always go together. So as vitaka, vichara diminish, you're into the second jhana. As piti diminish, you're into the third jhana. As sukha diminish, you are into the fourth jhana. And in the fourth jhana, only ekagata remains. So when you are meditating, you are into the rupa bhava with the gradual reduction of the chitta. As you go through the jhana, the chitta has now completely reduced. And when we say reduce, we're not saying disappear. We're saying it unify with mano. In other words, chitta and mano are no longer two separate mental experiences. The two are now one, combined already, unified. Okay, they are no longer separable. This is the state of mind when you are able to accomplish the four jhanas in the rupa bhava, when you are entering the jhanas. Once that has been accomplished, right, with these four jhanas, the mind moves into a new realm if you want to go further, if you continue to go beyond. And this is not something commonly accomplished. Even up to the fourth jhana is not a very common accomplishment, but some people who are very good at meditation can reach the fourth jhana. Now going beyond the four jhanas, because at the end of the four jhana, only ekagata remains, and ekagata simply means mano and chitta are unified as one. Okay, eka means oneness. Ekagata. But unfortunately, the term ekagata is often translated as single-pointedness. It's not single-pointedness. It's basically oneness of mind. Right? So now with oneness of mind, that means we just say it's only mano that is remaining. We now enter into the next realm. At this point, Chitta has unified with Mano. Basically, there's only Mano remaining. And then entering into the imageless realm and gradual reduction of Mano now. In the jhanas, we are reducing the chitta until chitta more or less is no longer there. Now we're reducing the mano until the mano has finally stopped. Okay. First, the chitta has stopped by unifying with mano. Now we're stopping the mano in this imageless realm. Cycling through one by one. Infinite. I will not explain this because if you go to Bhante's channel, you will find Bhante already explained quite a bit. So if you go to Bhante's meditation retreat in 2017 December, you go to the day 9, Bhante explained this very thoroughly. Look for day 9 of meditation retreat in 2017, and Bhante would explain this very detailed. So going through the 4 realms, imageless realm, finally, that is completely stilling the mano. At the end of it, mano has stopped, and the mind is completely stilled, completely still in the sense it's no longer experiencing. The mind is not experiencing anymore. Absolute stopping of the mind. Cessation of sanya and vedana. Complete stopping of the mind. At this point, that state is called avijja. Now, avijja is popularly translated as ignorance. Well, ignorance is one of the meanings, but avijja, every Pali word, usually it doesn't have a direct English word to correspond. Avijja has more than one meaning in English language. Another word that Bhante uses is insentience. In the word vijja means knowing or experiencing, awareness, consciousness. So avijja means it is not there. The in front means it's not there. So there is no consciousness. Another word for this is unconsciousness. Bhante used to use unconsciousness, but in the recent years before he passed, he called it insentience. Okay, I'll explain and show you what happens during insentience. At this point, I would like to point out a very important thing in history, which is not very well explained. It is only explained up to a certain extent. Prince Siddhartha realized that there is this kind of meditation. So he went out looking for teachers to teach him. Alara Kalama and Ramaputra, the two of them. Alara Kalama first and then Ramaputra. And they have only accomplished up to the realm of nothingness. If you look at imageless realm, the third one, the realm of nothingness, Akinchayatana, right? They have only reached that point. So Prince Siddhartha learned it up to that point. The second teacher, Ramaputra, Putra actually normally means son of, not prince, but the son of. So Ramaputra is the son of Rama. And Ramaputra told Siddhartha that his father, Rama, before he passed away, left behind instructions how to accomplish the next state, neither sensation nor no sensation. So those instructions, unfortunately, Ramaputra was not able to accomplish. He was not able to accomplish, attain the fruition of this. But Prince Siddhartha practiced it based on those instructions and actually accomplished it. In other words, he is now better than his teacher. And at that point, Ramaputra basically asked him, would you like to now take over to teach my congregation? Prince Siddhartha back off and say, no, I want to go further. He was looking for the solution to attain the last part, Sanya Vedayita Nirodha, absolute stopping of the mind. So he left the teachers because those teachers can no longer teach him. He's already beyond their skill level. So he joined some ascetics, went into the cave and whatever, and practiced asceticism, believing that asceticism will help him attain this ultimate state of stopping the mind. But unfortunately, he could not. He nearly died from that because he fainted. He lost consciousness because he thought he had to stop everything. He stopped eating, drinking, and now he thought he had to stop breathing. And when he did that, he sort of fainted, but he was then brought back to consciousness, and then he was helped to become back to living normally and realize that asceticism is not the way. And that's when he started to leave the five ascetics to go on his own to look for the solution. And he finally came to the Bodhi tree under the town of Gaya. And today it's called Bodh Gaya. So he was there under the Bodhi tree and he meditated and he went through all kinds of mental states, and finally he attained that. So Prince Siddhartha finally reached the point where he stopped the mind. It was waking up from this stopping of the mind that he began to experience what is Paṭicca-Samuppāda. And this is what Bhante Punnaji told me. He says that the first discovery or explanation of Paṭicca-Samuppāda came from Prince Siddhartha awakening from Sanya-Vedayita Nirodha and experiencing Paṭicca-Samuppāda. And in that experience, he saw how suffering arises and saw the way to end suffering. And basically, with that awakening, he became the Buddha. So in other words, Prince Siddhartha became the Buddha because he meditated until the mind had stopped. And then when he woke up from that, as he woke up, he became aware of all that. He saw the ultimate reality of everything. And then he became the Buddha. So the awakening from stopping the mind is how Siddhartha became the Buddha. Okay, so now we're going to look into that. So this is the cessation of all perceptions. Now let's cycle through what happens during meditation. What happens to the three parts of mental experiences? We know that chitta is where the hindrances are. The hindrances arise because of chitta. So abandoning the five hindrances is stilling the chitta. So now the chitta, the five hindrances have been abandoned. And then going through the jhanas until the fourth jhana, right? So having abandoned the five hindrances, chitta is still. Going through the jhanas, arriving at the fourth jhana, chitta becomes unified with mano. That is ekagata. Once upon attaining the fourth jhana, the mind, the mano and chitta become one, unified. Now there's no more chitta, and mano and chitta are one. Going to the arupa bhava, that means the imageless realm, the ayatanas, beyond the jhanas, mano is stilling the mano and attaining the fourth stage there, neither sensation nor no sensation. Mano has completely stilled. It's there, right? There's no experiencing, but mano has stilled. Consciousness is still there. Okay. Now there's one thing. Yeah, it's okay. I'll come to that later. So now, at that point, stopping the mind is basically cessation of all perception. Now the vijnana also has stopped. And this is arriving at Sanya Vedayita Nirodha. So now you can see gradual stages, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Having in number 1, abandoning the five hindrances, chitta is stilled, and then attaining the fourth jhana, ekagata, chitta is unified with mano. And then going through the arupa bhava, the imageless realm, mano is still. This is the one thing I wanted to say. Those 4 imageless realm, some people call it the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th jhana. No, jhana is not the correct word. Jhana is basically referring to the process of unifying the mind. Here, the mind is already unified. These are ayatanas. They are not jhanas. But many people, out of, I don't know, for whatever reason, they just refer to those as the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, and the eighth jhana. No, they are not. Okay? So they are ayatanas. So at that point, number 3, having attained the fourth ayatana, mano is still, and finally going beyond that, stopping the mind completely. Right? What happens when the mind is stopped? Okay. This one, the information here I got from the sutras, so it's pretty accurate. Sanya and Vedana has ceased. No more Sanya, no more Vedana. Because there is no more Sanya, there is no more Vedana, then there is no Sankara. Without Sankara, there is no Vijnana. And when you don't have all this, you really don't even have Mano and Chitta, right? Because the Mano and Chitta is completely still, non-experiencing, no activity going on. But what is going on? The body is still alive. The life force in the body remains. That's Ayu. Okay. Because if the life force is not there, the body basically is dead, right? And of course, at the same time, there has to be body heat. Without that, the body is dead. A dead body is cold. So Ayu and Usma are present. But what is intact, meaning they are not destroyed, but they are not active. That is Indriya and Jivitindriya. Indriya is talking about the vital faculties, the sense organs. Sense organs are there. They can work, but they are not active. In other words, your eye is not seeing anymore. But the eye is still capable of seeing. The capacity, the capability is there. So Indriya refers to the faculty's capability. So the capability is there, but it is not active. Jivendriya, it has to do with life activity. I think it has to do with digestion, respiration, and all these other things. Again, they are there, they're intact, but not active. So up to this point, there's not much detail discussed, but you can find them in Majjhima Nikaya 43 and 44 if you're interested to read. But in there, it's very confusing. If you try to read the English translations, you get very confused because of the way different people translated different words. But this is, in a nutshell, what I have managed to put together. By the way, if I didn't say specifically, this is what Bhante translated, then whatever I'm saying is my own expression. It is my paraphrasing of what I have learned from Bhante. So these things in this detail, they are not translated by Bhante. So they didn't come from Bhante, but it's based on my understanding of what Bhante taught me. And then looking at the sutra, then I arrive at this conclusion. Okay, so be aware of that. If I didn't say this is what the Bhante translated, then it is not. It is my paraphrasing. And my paraphrasing is based largely on what Bhante has taught me and I have understood. And also sometimes I do my own research, especially into psychology, neurology, and neuroscience. Those areas, then I add on to what Bhante has taught me. Okay. So this is based on the scriptural text. Now listen to Bhante's explanation. When one awakens from this state, one has become a Buddha. And listen to what Bhante says about that.
That Paṭicca-Samuppāda, if properly understood, all suffering can be brought to an end. That's what the Buddha pointed out. And how is that? He pointed out that Although the existential philosophers thought that we exist, that existence is the most fundamental thing, the Buddha pointed out that existence is a delusion. That's the wrong concept. We do not really exist. Now that he understood by freeing the mind of emotions. It is the emotions that make us think that we exist. The emotions are not able to think, and the emotions desire things or hate things. It is only by getting rid of emotions and purifying the mind, freeing the mind of emotions, that the idea of existence will disappear. So he purified the mind, and that is how we talk about the jhanas. We said the jhanas are really levels of mental purity. There is the first level of mental purity, second level of mental purity, third level of mental purity, fourth level of mental purity. And then we go beyond the fourth level into infinity of space, infinity of perception, infinity of no existence, the infinity of neither perception nor neither sensation nor no sensation, and ultimately he stopped the process of sensation and perception. That means he stopped that activity called mind. And when that activity called mind is stopped, are you conscious? When that activity called mind has stopped, there is no consciousness. You are not aware of anything.
Emerging from the state of insentience, Prince Siddhartha attained Buddhahood, awakening to Buddhahood. And how does that happen? Let's look at the reversing of what has happened earlier on. Earlier on, from stilling the chitta to unifying with mano to stilling the mano to arriving at insentience, we are now at the state of insentience. Let's see what happens to this thing called mind as we awake from insentience. So when we begin to awake from insentience, insentience disappears, vijnana returns because sanya and vedana has returned. So when sanya and vedana returns, sankhara can begin to construct vijnana from sanya and vedana. And when that happens, mental image arises, rupa. So this is the role of vijnana. In other words, it's the vijnana aspect of the mental experience. Now vijnana is intact. Now, Again, I want to remind you of the word concurrence. Bhante used the word concurrence. He didn't say one after another, dependent. No, not once, not like walking up the steps. This is concurrent. Okay. This is like when you see, it's because there's light reflected from the object entering the eye, and then your retina catches the light. The message, the signals are sent to the brain to process. You become aware. So all this is heaven at the same time. It's not like one after another. It's not like one step. It's not existential. It is experiential. Concurrence of logical antecedents, concurrence of these conditions arising. So don't think of vijnana arising first, then only mano arise. No, it's all happening at the same time, but on a piece of paper, I cannot show you it's happening at the same time. I'm just showing you step by step. But that step by step is not the actual physical, the actual thing that's happening physically. It's all happening concurrently, dependent on the conditions. And because the mind has awakened, it is able to sense sanya and experience vedana. And because of that, sankara arises to construct them into vijnana. Rupa arises, and the mano is conscious of experiences. So now the mano is conscious of experiences. And because of that, we begin to, the mano becomes conscious of experiences, right? And then it becomes aware. And mano is able to produce the process of papancha, to assign names and labels to the mental image, rupa, nama rupa. And then mano brings all the different five senses together with its own memory together. So the five senses from the physical sense organs come together. The five different vijnanas from the sense organs combined with mano vijnana. 6 of them are called salayatana. Okay, this is the collective experiencing of all 6 sensual fields together, and then together they form concepts. Cognition and concept of an objective experience. Now, in many videos at this point, when Bhante speaks about this experience, Bhante keeps using the word object. He's not talking about one object. He's actually referring to the whole objective experience. That means what we perceive as the world. So you could say object is referring to the experience of the world. Right? So the word object is commonly used by Bhante, but it's not like one object. It's actually the object here is referring to the experience of the world. Keep your mind experiential, not existential, right? Not the physical world, but the experiencing of the world. So phassa is the experiencing of those 6 senses put together, forming the concept of a world. That's what phassa is. But phassa has been translated as contact. We already dealt with that in the last recollections number 4, where we clarified phassa is not contact. It's basically cognition of this objective experience. And Bhante used the word object, but he's really referring to the experience of a world out there. And so the concept of the existence of a world is formed. Now, concurrently, I'm not going to say one after another, concurrently, chitta arises. So what happens when chitta arises? Right? So chitta is no longer unified with mano, and chitta arises concurrently. What happens in chitta then? Chitta experiences the feeling whether this objective experience of the world is pleasant or unpleasant. I repeat, Vedana is the feeling whether the objective experience of the world is pleasant or unpleasant. So at this point, Vedana in the Paṭicca-Samuppāda is referring to the experience of the world. The question I'm going to deal with when I finish is What is this Vedana versus the Vedana in the Panchakanda? That one is a very tricky question. I come to that in a moment. But at this point, this Vedana we're talking about is actually the feeling whether this experience of the world is pleasant or unpleasant. Okay. In other words, it's the big picture. It's not talking about one object. It's the big picture. Okay. Now, with that, we react. We don't react to one thing. We react to the whole experience. So we react. It's the emotional reaction, whether it is to the pleasantness and unpleasantness of what has been experienced out there, so to speak. And when we react, we have a tendency to personalize the reaction, because when we react, we begin to say, oh, I am reacting. I feel this. I feel that. So by personalizing, we actually focus on this subjective experience. And when we begin to focus on subjective experience, we are now creating a duality, right? Breaking up the experience already. So with that, we cling on to this experience inside and say, oh, the body must be the self. I think there is a self, so the body must be the self. And that Sakaya Ditti arises. And that is how we experience chitta. Mood and temperament arises. Mood is how we feel about something. So it is associated with the Vedana. Temperament has to do with our reaction, and that is associated with the Tanha. Okay. So now it's transforming from insentience to Buddhahood. Right? So one is no longer, one is fully awakened now. This is why Bhante uses the phrase, awaken from the dream of existence. Because we think we exist, but when we awake from this, Siddhartha became the Buddha. He awoke from it and saw the Paṭicca-Samuppāda unfolding. And let's examine the unfolding of the Paṭicca-Samuppāda. Go back to the insentience. When at the state of insentience, Siddhartha awakens and becomes the Buddha, so Sanya Vedana returns, Sankara constructs, Vijnana Rupa arises, now Mano is conscious. And what is going on? Now we touch on the actual process of Paṭicca-Samuppāda. You can see how Bhante uses the word concurrence of logical antecedents. From a state of avijja, insentience, Sanya Vedana is the first thing, right? Actually, I should not say first thing. They all happen more or less at the same time, concurrent. So Sanya Vedana arises, and then Sankara constructs. And then you have Vijnana. That's really what's going on in the part of the mind, right? The green part is really the Vijnana part of the mental experience. So now Vijnana is there. With Vijnana there, Mano is also concurrently present with Papancha, giving name, interpreting, and then with the interpretation combining the other five senses together, the sixth sense are experienced as a whole, collective experiencing of all six sensual fields, and that forms this objective experience of the world out there, and the concept of the world is formed. So with that, the Mano interprets, assigning nama to the rupa, and then combining the five senses. Now all six senses come together, and the concept of the world is created in the mind. Concept of the existence of a world out there, that arises in the mind. Okay. So that is the activity of Mano. It's called cognitive process. So the one in green is the activity of Vijnana. The one in blue is the activity of the Mano. That's why I use different color. bear in mind, green is usually, in this kind of cases, green is usually referring to the vijnana experience of the mind, and blue is the mano experience of the mind, and pink or red is the experience of the chitta. So now, with the mind no longer unified, chitta is starting to activate, disturbing, shaking, right? And no longer stilled, the shaking of the chitta, then feeling of that experience arises, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, and chitta reacts, emotional reaction, personalizing the reaction, and creating the notion of a self. So now, with that, there is a Vedana, feeling of this objective experience. And that is the Vedana part. And that is the arising of this affective process we call Chitta. With that comes Tanha. Tanha, there are three kinds: Lobha, Dosa, or Moha. Basically, Lobha is when it is something pleasant, we want more. When it is something unpleasant, that's Dosa. Then we want to avoid it or get angry with it or want to get rid of it. Either way, we also have this notion that, oh, I am experiencing it. The I, the self, the subjective experience is strong. Oh, I exist. Delusion of a self-centered existence is moha. So the three types of tanha is kama tanha, which is to react to pleasant feelings; vibhava tanha, reacting to unpleasant feelings, not wanting it to exist anymore; bhava tanha is reacting to the subjective experience, thinking that I exist. So we personalize this existence, or personalize this as an existence, personalizing the subjective experience. And with that, yeah, okay. With that, the concept of the self in the world exists. And we need to think, where is the self? And then somehow we can touch and feel the body. Oh, the body must be the self. And this thinking is called Sakaya Ditti, the thinking that, oh, this body is the self. Because there is a subjective experience. So let's listen to Bhante's explanation about this subjective experience. And we personalize this subjective experience. And this personalizing arises with this Panchakanda. Okay, so let's listen to Bhante's explanation of this experiential way.
The experiential way is to see that what we see or hear or smell or taste or touch is an experience. Seeing is an experience. Hearing is an experience. Normally we think I come first and you or the object comes and I see you or the object. So that means the subject and the object comes first, then the subject and object meets and the subject sees the object. That is how people think. But that is not what it is. The seeing comes first. And it is in the seeing that the subject is created and the object is created. It is in the process of seeing that I come into being. And the object comes into being. When that is properly understood, then the idea of existence disappears. It is only when that idea of existence disappears, you are free not only of existence, you are also free of what is called death. If you don't exist, how can you die? That is awakening from the dream of existence. This is why the Buddha is called Buddha. Buddha means one who has awakened from the dream of existence. One who has awakened from the dream of existence. That is that third knowledge that the Buddha spoke of.
So, Bhante started mentioning it's about us personalizing the subjective experience. See, when we see something, we experience something, and then we think, oh, there must be something inside here that is doing the experiencing. So that is the subjective experience. That is what arises in the mind first, that I am seeing something. And then the mind begins to personalize the experience. And because of that, it separates it, a dichotomy. Let's take a look at that. Okay. The experience of seeing depends on the necessary conditions. So when light enters the reflected from the object and enters the eye, we see, and then there is an experience. All that has ever happened up to this point in reality is purely experiencing. That's it. That was just an experience. But because of this personalizing the subjective experience, and that is called, break it down, Pancha Upadana Kanda. Right? So it's the Upadana, the personalizing of the five constituents of perception. So with the process of perception, we begin to personalize. I am seeing something in here, must be seeing it or experiencing it. With that personalizing, the subjective is created, a subjective experience. And because of that, it creates a dichotomy then, because you cannot have a subjective if there is no objective. So you're breaking the experience. So it's called dichotomy of experience. Subjective is what's inside, objective is what's out there. And then we begin to project in the mind, oh, there is a dog out there, right? The world out there. So that's why it's called the loka. The world is out there. So the mind is making that projection. That is what Paṭicca-Samuppāda is trying to explain to us. So when the self has been personalized and we begin to project, there is a world out there. So this personalizing of the subjective experience leads to the notion that the body is me, right? The Sakaya Ditti, the concept of a self in the world. First, the self arises and then the world. And there must be a starting point to the self, because this is the time our mind begins to think in existential terms. What are existential terms? Time and space. So we have already considered space, the body. Body occupies space. So that is the space part. The time part is the body must have a past, a present, and a future. What is the past of the body? The birth, jati. So the mind begins to examine birth, right? And then aging and death. Now, birth and aging and death are not part of this mental experience. This is the part which in Paṭicca-Samuppāda it's referred to as the insecurity of life. Bhante uses the term insecurity of life, dukkha. Because the dukkha occupies space and time, the dukkha the body ages, so suffering arises, and that leads to all kinds of suffering. So this is what Paṭicca-Samuppāda was actually teaching us. And the Buddha, when he first became the Buddha, when Prince Siddhartha awake from this and became the Buddha, he saw all this unfolding. And he realized how suffering came to be. Of course, this is a very long process, very complicated and tedious process. If anybody else wants to experience this, it's not easy to get into the arupa samadhis, right? Arupa bhavas. So Buddha gave us a shortcut. From here, with his wisdom, he then simplified the whole thing as the Four Noble Truths, and then taught us how we can get to it with the Eightfold Way. This is why the Four Noble Truths is a very simplified explanation of Paṭicca-Samuppāda. There is suffering, and suffering has causes that leads to the suffering, and all this can be put to an end. And of course, there is a way leading to it. So the Buddha created the so-called shortcut, right? And Bhante uses the explanation, and this is how Bhante explains it. It's like there is an island nobody has ever been to. So this explorer arrives at the island, explores the island, but his process of exploring the island is very tedious. He has to go from one part of the island to another part of the island and circle out the whole island. But then he made a shortcut for people to realize how to find the island. He started to draw a map of the island. So what the Buddha did is create a map. And the first map is the Four Noble Truths. And within the Four Noble Truths is a detailed map called the Eightfold Way. So basically, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Way are the Buddha's map of what is suffering and how to put suffering to an end. Because he saw this Paṭicca-Samuppāda unfolding when he first awakened from insentience, from the dream of existence. Okay. And yeah, then when he woke from it, in the Dhammapada verse 153, 154, there was a commentary that said this is the verse that the Buddha created when he first awoke from the dream of existence. And this is Bhante Punnaji's translation. Through innumerable lives in this vortex of rebirth, did I seek the creator of this grief-ridden world. Never did I find this creator unknown. It is painful to be born again and again. Oh, creator, I have seen you. You will never create again. Your structure is dismantled. The foundation is destroyed. The mind has stopped creating. The emotional urge has ceased. It's the mind that was the creator. Right? So there's no creator out there. It's the mind. So many religions that follow creator God, where did the concept of creator God come from? From the mind of the thinkers. Right? So basically, it's the mind that created concepts that we call world, that we call self. Okay. So basically, that is Paṭicca-Samuppāda in a nutshell. We won't go into the practice of the meditation that leads to insentience, because that is a very long process, and a part of it I'm not very clear, that the arupa bhava, that means the ayatana, so I won't be able to explain much of that. That's why we don't go into that. We understand the Paṭicca-Samuppāda. If you understand the Paṭicca-Samuppāda, you will have a much better understanding of what is suffering and how it all arises, because of the way we personalize things going on. Anyone, any other questions? If none, we can call it a close.
Thank you, Bro
All right.
Billy.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, brother. Thank you.
Your weekend,
Thank you so
whatever you
much,
have.
Brother
Thank
Billy.
you.
Suki Hotu.
Sadhu, sadhu,
Really
Suki
appreciate
Hotu.
it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay. Take
brother.
care.
Thank you to
Okay.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Take care. See you next time. All right.
Bye.
Bye.